My name is Emily, and I am a young woman who came to the small town of Riverstone for work. My budget was limited, so I decided to stay at a rundown hotel on the outskirts of town to save money. As soon as I entered my room and started unpacking, something strange happened. I heard a knocking at the door. Startled, I quickly opened the door, but no one was there. Looking down the corridor, all I saw is emptiness and silence. At first, I thought my imagination was playing a cruel trick, so I closed the door, trying to calm myself. However, after a while, the knocking on the door happened again. The sound was more persistent this time, and I decided to open the door as quickly as possible. And before me stood a middle-aged woman dressed in a thin red robe. Her eyes were red from tears, and she looked terrified. She told me that she had accidentally locked herself out of her room when she stepped out momentarily. My sympathy for her overcame my strange fear, and I agreed to go downstairs and get a spare key from the concierge. I felt I couldn't leave the woman in such a predicament, especially in an unfamiliar place. Taking the elevator down, I approached the front desk where the concierge should have been, but there was no one there. I pressed the call button and waited. After a while, the concierge appeared, and I asked him about possibly getting a spare key for someone else's room. The concierge looked at me strangely and asked,
"Why do you need that?"
I explained the situation, telling him about the woman in the red robe and how she had accidentally locked herself out of her room. He nodded slowly, but then uttered words that made my blood run cold. The concierge said,
"There is only one guest in our hotel today, and that's you."
My heart stopped. "This can't be," I murmured, fear engulfing me. The concierge seemed to remember something and added,
"A few years ago, there was a tragedy in our hotel. A woman rented the room you have now. She had divorced her husband and wanted to end her life. Wearing a white robe, she walked down the hallway, went downstairs, and took a knife from the kitchen. When she returned, she realized she had locked herself out and decided to slit her wrists in the hallway. And it happened. Her white robe turned red because so much blood was on the floor. Since then, guests on this floor occasionally claim they see her."
I turned pale and lost my ability to speak out of sheer horror. The concierge, on the other hand, laughed as if it were a joke. Stepping away from the desk, he added that they had gotten used to such situations and were no longer afraid. But I was overwhelmed by a chilling fear, realizing that something unbelievable and mystical was happening in this cheap hotel. I decided not to stay in that room, packed my belongings, and moved to a more expensive hotel. While vacationing at the beach in the US, I stayed in a hotel on the 8th floor with a view of another hotel right across. But something didn't feel right from the beginning. Even though it was a beautiful beach and sunny weather, there was an eerie feeling, like something mysterious was happening. I felt uncomfortable whenever I returned from the beach and started changing in my room. A girl in a striped robe was staying in the hotel across from mine, and she kept staring at me. I tried to hide behind the curtains, but my room had a lot of glass, and the bathroom was down the hallway. I didn't care about the redhead girl across the way. She wasn't my type. But a few days later, something strange happened. I met a lovely blonde girl, and we quickly got close. We shared passionate kisses and wanted to be together in my room. But that night, she turned into something weird. While we were getting close, my girlfriend noticed the girl in the striped robe watching us. She screamed, dressed in a hurry, and left, looking scared and upset. My girlfriend ran out of the room, and I couldn't stop her. I was confused and didn't know what to do. I remembered the red-headed girl from the other hotel watching us. So, I dressed and went to her hotel room to complain and find out what happened. But when I tried to open her door, a security guard from the hotel appeared. He told me to leave before something terrible happened. I explained that the red-headed girl had ruined my night, but the security guard said something strange. He told me that the hotel had been closed for a long time. The top floor had collapsed, and a whole family had died. Nobody stayed above the 5th floor, and there was no 8th floor. It was as if the bed I had been waiting on didn't exist. I was baffled and looked around the hotel. Some potty had no walls, and the roof was crooked. How could I have not noticed this before? And where did the redhead girl come from? It was all extraordinary. The following day, I packed my things quickly and left that place behind, leaving the mystery of the girl in the striped robe and the abandoned hotel. The hotel where I work as a receptionist is in a picturesque suburb. It's a pretty old 3-story stone building, with an attic on the 3rd floor where all sorts of old junk are stored. There are only a few rooms, and they are all designed to look old-fashioned. Overall, it's a beautiful place. I arrived for my shift that evening. As we worked in shifts, my coworker handed over her duties to me and mentioned that all the guests had checked out. This was quite strange because, as far as I could remember, the hotel had never been empty during my shifts. Later in the evening, the cleaning lady went home, and the security guard called in sick, saying he couldn't come to work. It turned out that I would have to spend the night in the hotel alone. I wasn't exactly scared at that moment, but I felt uneasy. I called all my friends, but none could come over to keep me company. Around 11 p.m., I walked around the premises to check all the entrances and exits. I locked the letting and back doors and went to my staff room. It's a large room, like a studio apartment, with a shower and toilet. In one corner, a security desk with monitors displaying footage from security cameras was placed around the building and on both floors in the hallways. There are no cameras in the guest rooms, for obvious reasons. I grabbed a book and sat on a small couch near the window, waiting for potential guests. There were telephones in the guest rooms to reach the reception, and I had a multi-line phone on my desk with all the room numbers listed. As I read my book, I got absorbed in the story. Time passed, and it was well past midnight, but there were still no guests. The hotel was eerily quiet. Then, I heard the sound of a child crying. It was strange because how could there be a child here? I cautiously stepped into the corridor on the 1st floor. The sound was coming from above. My legs felt like jelly at that moment, and I had goosebumps. I thought perhaps a cat had somehow gotten inside and was stuck. I went up to the 2nd floor. The sound was still coming from above, and I felt it was coming from the attic on the 3rd floor. I mustered the courage to go up there. The attic didn't even have any lights. But I had to go. What if a cat needed help? Or something else? I went to the storage room, grabbed a flashlight, and headed upstairs. The sound, which now sounded more like a whimper than a cry, led me to the far corner of the attic. I shined my flashlight and saw an old phonograph. A vinyl record was playing, and the needle kept moving on its own, skipping from place to place. I was terrified, frozen in place. Who had started this machine? I quickly turned and ran back down the stairs. As I reached my floor, I stumbled and fell to the dirty floor. I jumped up, ran into my room, locked the door from the inside, and leaned against it. What was happening? I was praying, begging for everything to be okay. I spent an hour staring at the sliver of light under my door. Nothing happened. Then, I finally noticed the phone ringing. I rushed to it, relieved that someone was calling, but the call was coming from inside the hotel, from room number 8, as indicated by the illuminated light next to the number on the phone. I hesitantly picked up the receiver. Silence. I slammed it down, my heart pounding. I rushed to the security monitors, checking the cameras on the second floor. The door to room number 8 was slightly ajar, even though I distinctly remembered locking it earlier during my rounds. The windows were closed, and there was no draft. The air conditioning was working fine. I could feel my hair turning gray. I sat, still glued to the screen for what felt like hours. Nothing unusual happened in the footage, but the attic door on the third floor was clearly closed. I couldn't understand it. The crying had stopped. I eventually gathered my courage and went to recheck the attic. It was empty. That night, I couldn't sleep. I felt like I was losing my mind. I couldn't explain what had happened, and it haunted me. I took some time off, went to church, prayed, confessed, and returned to work. But I made sure never to be alone in the hotel again. I still don't know what that presence was or what it wanted. The only reminder of that night is the gray hair on my head,